Hello, Simone. It is wonderful to be here today. And we are going to be doing an episode today, which I think really elevates why the disintermediation of the traditional news system to online bloggers, because this is something you see increasingly in terms of how are people getting their information about the world, is actually very important to getting an honest understanding of reality, so long as you're choosing the right people to listen to. And this episode is going to be the type of thing that you would never see on one of the mainstream news stations. And I'm just going to give the top notes right now for people who are like, okay, I get the story. I'm going to click off before we go into too much detail. But it is the fact that Hamas, one of the largest donors to Hamas, like one of the largest funders of Hamas, the people who started this war in Israel, okay? They are also the largest state donor to the most US's large universities, or to the university system in the US.
Iran?
I know, right? That's what you would think. No, but I mean,
Iran. What?
No, it is Qatar or Qatar, depending on how fucking obsequious you are, because I always hate when people play little words with, oh, you're not saying Qatar right.
Well,
I call it Qatar.
We have American accents, so it's Qatar.
As a quick side note, if you were wondering who is the bigger supporter of Hamas, Iran or Qatar, Qatar has given Hamas over $1.8 billion, and Iran gives them something like 100 million to 350 million. That's what they gave them last year a year. So in terms of just financial costs, Qatar is the bigger supporter of Hamas, but Iran plays a big role in giving them lots of military supplies and training. So in terms of integration with their political elite, Iran is a bigger supporter. Yeah. So people are like, wait, I didn't know this. Why didn't I know this? Why didn't I know that they heavily funded Hamas? Why did I not know that they were also the largest state donor to US university systems? And this matters downstream when you are looking at the university policy that is allowing this rampant anti-Semitism on campuses.
Would you like to know more?
Because a lot of people, they're like, oh, I'm going to not donate to my university because of this. Like a lot of Jewish families are saying that right now and stuff like that. And what they don't realize is they're like, why are universities still doing this from a financial perspective? Why are they still being so neutral? Why is it when there was this great moment where Gay, the head of one of these universities,
Gay.
The head of Harvard at the time,
who then subsequently had some plagiarism problems. And,
yes. So she responded that hateful speech is at odds with Harvard's values and that calling for the genocide of Jews is anti-Semitic. But when pressed on whether it violates the code of ethics, she said it can be, depending on the context. So genocide, demanding genocide of an ethnic group, specifically when it's Jews. Of course, this wouldn't matter with anyone else. At the top universities in the US, why is that? Maybe it violates our code of ethics. I'm not going to make any hard calls on this right now. So why are they having this position? And it makes a lot more sense when you look at where the money is coming from for these institutions, or at least a very large, and we'll get into the size of it, how they get the money into the universities and everything like that as the thing goes on. But I just want to get it out there up front.
So I'm so confused about Qatar still, though, which, by the way, American accent, we would rather say something that rhymes with guitar rather than Qatar, like someone who's trying to kill
continue,
themselves.
Simone.
I'm so confused about Qatar because Qatar is majority Sunni, whereas Iran is primarily Shia. Are they aligned? Are they partners? Or do they just both really like...
you underestimate the level of anti-Semitism in the Muslim world.
And this is what
hold on. They just really hate Jews. Yeah. So this is what and I need to go back here because it's not just that they hate Jews. It's also part of the power hierarchy in this world. So I really want to go into the stats here, but I'm also going to provide some like overall framing. Okay.
Okay.
So people who may not know, and I'm like, normal news would not report this. And they're like, why would normal news not report this?
Yeah.
And even I feel a little honestly uncomfortable talking about it because I have a lot of Qatari friends. If you are like wealthy and successful, you like in your social groups, you are going to have Qatari friends. And Qataris, there's only something like 300,000 Qataris in the world. So It's a very small, the ethnic population of Qatar is incredibly small. Most of the people there are foreign laborers or basically slaves. And so what that means is if you have Qatari friends, that means you have friends in the Qatari government or that are related to the Qatari government, right?
Sure.
And so when you're talking about any of the heads of these major news stations or something like that, there are parties where they're going to have to go to later that day, and they are going to look like, it's not even like a conspiracy thing. They're just going to look like really bad if they are putting shade on Qatar. And they may not get deals. They may not get hired by companies because they have so much money. They have their fingers in a bit of everything because of that big natural gas vein that they found in Qatar. A lot of people think it's oil. Oil is not why Qatar's rich, it's natural gas. But sorry, I don't want to get into the geopolitics here. But the other thing I want to talk about is we have a lot of friends who are Emirati and Qatari. And I'm not like trying to conflate the two countries, but what I'm pointing out here is these are like the nicest of the Muslim states generally to like the US, like in terms of friendly policy. Saudi Arabia, we're also pretty close with, but occasionally we have some friction there. And Saudi Arabia is much more like a brutal dictatorship. So like Americans can understand, but with Qatar and the UAE, they've done a pretty good job with their image. In fact, speaking of, I am about to go to my reunion at Stanford Business School. And one of the guys I am going to be meeting there is an old friend of mine who I actually really like the person, great person, Khalid Alamari. And he has like over 4 million subscribers on YouTube. So
and he would always come up to you
always
at school and be like, Malcolm, what's my name? It's Khalid.
Khalid, I'll call him Khalid. Okay, whatever. Anyway,
that's why it's still funny.
It is that I always mispronounce his name, but he's a big shot now. And he actually did a tour, went around the UAE with him. And so I went to check his channel recently. And I think this just shows what we're talking about when you're in this bubble. So his latest video that has over 250,000 views is surprising delivery drivers with their families. So this is supposed to be like a feel-good movie where it's like a surprising, I don't know, troops with their families or something like that. And if you're an Emirati and you watch this, is going to look just like a feel-good movie to you. But if you are an American and you watch this, you're like, wait a second. Why would delivery drivers have not seen their families in a long time? And it almost looks like a slave owner in the South being like Mr. Beast, but in like the slave owning South. And he comes in, he goes, this guy thought we sold his family to another owner, but I'm going to trick him. And when he gets home, they'll all be there. And then confetti will fly behind the doors. And the guy like comes home devastated. And he's genuinely having this emotional moment because he sees his family that he thought was sold off. And the guy's dancing around all Blippi style in front of the door with confetti. I'm such a good person.
Here's the plan. We've told the writers that they're just going to be shooting a commercial for Noon Minutes today. But little did they know that they're going to be delivering to someone special. Their families, who we've flown in from outside of the country to give them the biggest, most special surprise.
And I don't think that he's a bad person at all, or that he sees the way this comes off from another cultural perspective. And I think within the context, that's a good thing for a person to do in that society. So it's an interesting thing to think about. But what I'm saying is the ethics within these countries and the hierarchy and the game that these countries are playing is very different than the game that we're playing. And so you can say, why is it so important that they make these anti-Semitic plays, even when they're not anti-Semitic? Because we have a lot of friends in these countries, and genuinely a lot of the elites, like a lot of the elite Qataris, aren't really anti-Semitic, but they lose status in the hierarchy game of that sort of regional geopolitics if they don't make anti-Semitic plays and anti-Semitic statements.
I see, because they're like have to code switch, right? I feel like once you reach a certain level of eliteness and you're international and as a player, you're going to start coding as that international monoculture of like wealthy people, and they all have a look and a thing, and they come across the same in dinner parties. It's the same people, it's the same international global elite. But then locally, they still need to assume certain stances to not be seen as losers, not part of the culture.
Yeah. And they also have to deal with like their citizens. If you're talking about Saudi Arabia or something like that, they have to deal with their citizens if they look too pro-Israel. And people are like, come on, the Saudi citizens are not, they were the majority of the attackers on 9/11. Like, why is that the case? Because of the extremist form of Islam was this practice in Saudi Arabia. But I don't want to go too far on this. I want to
Well,
actually.
I also want to be fair. If you're from a certain culture and that culture is more likely to be biased in favor of Palestinians over Israelis, you're going to hear more things about terrible things happening to Palestinians and the plight of Palestinians than you are going to hear about the plight of Israelis. And therefore, you aren't crazy for just due to availability heuristic, probably being a little bit more biased against Israelis, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that this is partially why within these regions and within the geopolitics, what I'm trying to explain is why do you not hear the role that countries like Qatar are playing in all of this?
Mhm.
And it's because they are our allies. They're like the US's allies, and they are very well entrenched within elite social circles in the United States. And so not even shadow games or anything like that. I just don't want to, I know if our show is more popular right now, I probably wouldn't be saying any of this because I would have to answer to people being like, hey, why are you calling it out? Like, why are you, can't we just pretend like this isn't the case? Hold on, Simone. I will always stay to my integrity, but I'm just saying this is the type of thing you got to answer to people for. But
I don't think you're ever really going to answer to people. I don't think you're genetically capable for being
before
honest
we
here.
go further, I want to frame, because a lot of people, they know how pro-Israel they are, like, or at least we're coming off as pretty pro-Israel right now. And they're like, why are you so against the protest? Don't you know that like children are dying? So just for some context here, when the Hamas came into power in Gaza, 42% of the population supported them. This was in December 2023. 33% of Germans supported the Nazis when they came into power.
Only 7% of Gazans blame Hamas for their current suffering. Even worse, just over 7 out of 10 Gazans continue to support Hamas's decision to launch the war against Israel with the 7th of October attack, while nearly 59% of Palestinians believe that Hamas should continue to rule in Gaza. Outrageous! And keep in mind, this is not Israeli data, but data from a survey conducted in March 2024 by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research itself. For all these reasons, Israel believes that Hamas's proposal is not sincere, and that it is only seeking to gain time to reorganize and rearm, and thus regain some control over the territory.
So if you're like, if you've never had a big freak out about the firebombing of Dresden or something like that, the US doing what needed to be done to take the Nazis out of power, then why are you freaking out about this now? A lot of innocent people died who were in Germany at the time. And people do not hand wring about this. More people died in the firebombing of Dresden than during the nuclear bombs. And so why is that? And then they're like, yeah, but okay, hold on. So this is in modern times, because then I'm like, okay, if you really cared about this, if this wasn't just like anti-Semitic thing, and I should point out, I don't think that a lot of the individual protesters are anti-Semitic. I think what they don't realize is that the forces that be that put all of this in motion are actually anti-Semitic. And they're like, no, that's not true. And I'm like, then why aren't you out there protesting about Haiti? And they're like, my university, it doesn't do business with people who directly have to do with Haiti. So protesting.
But also, there's no enemy.
That's not true. A huge contributor to what happened in Haiti right now was the national debt of Haiti. And actually, they were calling for okay, bit of
Yeah, but how do you can't fight debt? You need an enemy with a face on it.
Because the debt is owned by American banks. You literally, okay, so hold on. I'm going to take a little. So what you may not know is the president who was disappeared right before everything started going to hell.
Yeah.
The thing he did right before he was disappeared is he demanded that these banks that made all this money off of Haiti's unfair debt, because when Haiti declared independence, the French basically came in, they put guns to them heads and said, okay, either you buy yourselves, every human in Haiti, or we destroy everything. And so they were forced to take on this absolutely insane debt.
Oh dear.
And then this debt was bought by CIC, a bank in France. And then the debt was sold to banks like First National City Bank, today called Citibank, and Manufacturers Hanover Trust, now JP Morgan and Chase. And so why was this guy disappeared when we was talking about Haiti? Not getting reparations for like in the US reparations. They actually super deserve these reparations. And there are specific US institutions around today that are living on the profits of these institutions, Citibank and Chase.
Oh dear.
And you think your university isn't doing business with Citibank and Chase? You think seriously, you
Yeah,
think that half of
touche.
these protesters don't have, they don't care. It's not that they care about injustices done against black people or something like that. It's that the powers that are organizing and manipulating all of this actually have an anti-Semitic agenda,
Mhm.
which we will get to in a second. What is happening in this region is very much like some small portion of the US got reconquered by Native Americans, and all around them were a bunch of like racist redneck white hicks who every day talked about wanting them all killed, wanting them all destroyed, blah, blah, blah. One day they go in, they murder a bunch of these Native Americans for taking their land back. And then the Native American government is like, well, I just don't have another option right now. There is only one Jewish state. They are surrounded by Muslim majority states that these people could go to. People can be like, oh no, the Jews weren't always on that land. Didn't they take it from the Canaanites? Well, we know from DNA testing that Jews, even to their own chagrin, are around 50% Canaanite in their DNA. So no, they merged. It was two populations that merged in the region a very, very long time ago. And then they're like, well, the Gazans, they've been there for a long time. No, they were recent colonialist invaders. They're not like the people in northern Palestine, which that's different. We'll talk about that on another show. But Gazans uniquely have no ancestral claim to this area. They are the descendants of an imperialist expansionist conquest by a large empire. Specifically, their moving to the region was encouraged under rulers like Nuruddin Zengi and Saladin in the 12th century, and then continued during the later Mamluk and Ottoman periods. But I want to go further here because there's a number of really interesting things. So the first thing I want to go over is a lot of people also think Hamas was like random spastic attack of Israel because they like hated their conditions. And this is not the case. Hamas actually had a plan for what they were going to do as Israel after they beat the Israelis. And there was a great tweet on this I want to read to you that Richard Hanania put out. In late 2021, Hamas held a conference on what they would do after conquering Israel. They discussed water, sewage, currency, and making a directory of property to confiscate. They planned to not let talented Jews leave and make them work for the state.
Oh,
The ceasefire crowd doesn't get it. Israel has an actual enemy. It's not the enemy you wish they had. It's not people who can be reasoned into living in peace with a Jewish state. Hamas is actually serious about slaughtering the Jews and taking their land. This article suggests they're quote unquote crazy for making these plans. I don't think that's true at all. If Israel fought the war the way the international community wished, it would be destroyed in the long run. It's unfortunate the West does not understand this, but I'm confident Israel will win because it has no other choice. It faces a dark and bitter reality and can't afford the delusion of the rest of the world. So I want to be clear because this is actually interesting. So he did some, Hamas planned to exterminate the Jews in this attack. They
well,
thought
but not the productive Jews. That's a bit of an upgrade on what the Nazis were doing, and the Nazis weren't trying to monetize, so that's interesting.
I also like the realization there that Israel has no value without the Jews. Like the land of Israel is pretty useless land. It's like a desert with a little bit of arable like farming area, but not really that much is useful. It is useful because of the Jews. And even Hamas realizes this. We're like, we'll turn them into slaves. We'll round up, kill all the ones who aren't economically productive, and we'll turn the rest into slaves.
Again, a step up from the Nazis, at least. They see some practical value. Putting them in internment camps, that was like completely underutilizing knowledge workers, when instead you could do Auschwitz for knowledge workers. Isn't that just wonderful?
No, it is horrifying. What I'm going to do next, before I go into all the shit that's happening on university campuses right now, people are like, no, it's not explicitly anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
I want to go over the Qatar thing because this is really interesting.
Please.
Okay, so according to a Department of Education report from April 2023, American universities and colleges have received $19 billion from unreported sources, more than half of which has come from authoritarian and anti-democratic Middle Eastern governments. At the time of writing, the state of Qatar contributes more funds to the universities in the United States than any other country in the world in raw donations.
Wow.
And this is by the ISGP report. And here's a quote from the former Qatari Prime Minister, Hamad bin Jassim from 2022. We would pay them, journalists. Some of them have become MPs now. Other have become patriots. We would pay the journalists in many countries. We would pay them every year. Some of them even receive salaries. All the Arab countries were doing this, if not all of them, most of them. So again, this is just a normal thing for this part of the world to do. Oh, and I'll name the article that I am quoting from here. So this article is Dark Money Nightmare, How Qatar Bought the Ivy League.
Wow. But
Hamas-
why? Like, to what end is Qatar investing in
We're going to
universities
get to that.
and
I'm
the
just going to
media?
go over the stats first, okay?
Okay.
Or like the facts, okay?
All
So
right.
Hamas, an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, has enjoyed Qatar as its main sponsor. So they are the main sponsor of the Muslim Brotherhood to the tune of up to $360 million a year, and was until recently the home of Hamas's leadership. In 2012, Ismail Haniyeh, head of the terrorist group's political bureau, Masan, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, and a few other names that I can't pronounce, moved to Qatar for a life of luxury. This month, likely because of Israel's announcement that it will hunt down and eliminate Hamas leaders in Qatar and Turkey, the Qatar-based Hamas officials reportedly fled to other countries. Qatar has become the home to Sheikh Yusuf, the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, who was exiled from Egypt until his death in September 2022. According to the Mir Amit Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center, quote, Qardawi is mainly known as a key figure in shaping the concept of violent jihad and the one who allowed carrying out terror attacks, including suicide bombings against Israeli citizens, the U.S. forces in Iraq, and some of Arab regimes. Because of that, he was banned from entering Western countries and some Arab countries in 1999. He was banned from entering the USA. In 2009, he was banned from entering Britain. The Saudi state-run news agency, so keep in mind, Saudis are very biased against Qatar. Qatar embraces multiple terrorist and sectarian groups aimed at disturbing stability in the region, including the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda, and promotes the message and schemes of these groups through their media constantly. This is the kind of influence that U.S. universities and colleges are more than happy to see on their campuses in exchange for billions of dollars of Qatari donations. According to ISGAP, foreign donations from Qatar especially have had a substantial impact on fomenting growing levels of anti-Semitic discourse and campus politics in U.S. universities, as well as growing support for anti-democratic values within these institutions of higher education.
Anti-democratic values. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So hold on. No, it gets worse because they actually have measured amounts of this. So in 2023, ISGAP published a report, The Corruption of the American Mind, How Concealing Foreign Funding for Higher Education in the United States Predicts the Erosion of Democratic Values and Anti-Semitic Sentiment on Campus. It found that there was a direct correlation between anti-Semitism and censored speech on campuses and undocumented contributions from foreign governments, notably Qatar. Quote, the institutions receiving such undocumented money had, and then it's bullet points here, political campaigns to silence academics were more prevalent. Campuses receiving undocumented funds exhibited approximately twice as many campaigns to silence academics as those that did not. Students reported greater exposure to anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist rhetoric. Higher levels of anti-Semitic incidents were reported on their campuses. This relationship of undocumented money to campus anti-Semitism was stronger where the undocumented donors were Middle Eastern regimes rather than other regimes. From 2015 to 2020, institutions that accepted money from the Middle Eastern donors had on average 300% more anti-Semitic incidents than those institutions that did not. And then, quote, speech intolerance manifesting as campaigns to investigate, censor, demote, suspend, or terminate speakers and scholars was higher at institutions that received undocumented money from foreign regimes, end quote. So here you can see big number differences here, like 300%. Like 100% higher. Like we are talking like very significant differences in what's going on within these campuses.
This is wild.
And so,
okay, I'm trying to think like beyond just pure anti-Semitism, because I feel like there has to be more of a motivation than just, God, I hate those Jews. Is maybe so many of these nations are resource rich and they're trying to transition to become economies that in a post oil or natural gas dependent world are thriving and independent, they're powerful. And Israel may be one of the few, if not perhaps the only country in the Middle East that has a knowledge worker based economy that is thriving and influential. Therefore, it poses a threat to any nation, any country in the Middle East that has a tenuous economic position based on an unsustainable asset such as oil or natural gas. Therefore, nations like Iran and Qatar are going to be very nervous about Israel and try to undermine it, because as long as Israel is powerful there and it has the one source of value generation that is going to survive a post-oil world, then it's going to be very a
I
threat to
really
them.
appreciate your kind heart, but no, that's not what's happening.
Okay, so why
When
is
you
this
gotta think
happening?
about it. Okay, so these countries generally have authoritarian governments, whether you're talking about Qatar or Saudi Arabia or the UAE, it
Okay.
is monarchies.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. These monarchies have to like that you are allowed like a functional monarchy in the developed world. How does this happen? How do you broker this with your citizens? One is
Ah.
you give your citizens tons and tons of payouts, which is what these countries do. And two is you need to play to the populism of your citizens.
Uh-huh. Okay.
The citizens in these countries are extremist Muslims. Okay, I'm talking like based extremist Muslims.
I mean, in Iran, not so much, right? I mean,
Iran hates most of these countries. Simone, stop getting confused here, okay? Iran wants, okay, so Iran and Qatar are aligned because they both support the Muslim Brotherhood. It's weird. I don't want to get into the
okay,
inter-country
I get
politics
it.
here.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the on-the-ground politics of these countries.
Okay, yeah, like the public facing people, not the average citizen that's I don't really
No,
care.
Iran has a completely different structure
Yeah.
in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. It is a democracy. It is not a monarchy. It has to play to its citizens in a totally different way.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
So we're talking about the monarchies, all right?
Monarchies, yes.
Suppose you are hanging out in progressive circles or something like that, right? And this is the way anti-Semitism works.
Mhm.
And you say something like, today, like you can even imagine this if you were on like one of these college campuses, you know what? I don't hate the Jews and I actually think that what they're okay and they should be allowed to live in Israel.
Mm.
You would be like attacked or forced out of a position. This is the way anti-Semitism work. It makes everybody who thinks actually the Jews are okay afraid to say that within certain social circles, or they can lose their positions of power. You see this everywhere anti-Semitism begins to creep up.
Hmm.
They are not saying, actually, I don't hate the Jews. Actually, I have a lot of Jewish friends, which I know a lot of these people. They do have a lot of Jewish friends, and a lot of the people in the highest level of positions of power within these governments do not hate the Jews, but they cannot let that be known.
Uh-huh.
Because it becomes known in the same way you can't say that on college campuses right now. And people, and just so you know, like if we're using silly words here, people will be like, no, it's not that I hate Jews, I hate Zionists. See, here's the problem. 97% of Jews over the age of 40 are Zionists, and 80% of Jews under 40 are Zionists. And as they age, they'll probably become Zionists. And I've looked at various statistics, some show like 95%. So when you say, I don't hate the Jews, I just hate 97% of Jews, yeah, you're saying you hate Jews, okay? All of the things that are saying take down whatever, they're saying I hate Jews, okay? So let's be clear about that. This is, that's really all there is to it. It's to maintain their power structure. And it's because once anti-Semitism begins to become a status signal within a community, everyone in the community ends up leaning on it really quickly. And it becomes really dangerous to oppose it.
And so it's the goth echo chamber all over again.
It's the Gaza echo chamber. Yeah. What's your status? It's how anti-Semitic you are.
Yeah, how extreme you are. Yeah. When something is measured, that gets a little out of hand, no matter
But
what.
I want to talk about how bad it's getting, because I think a lot of people don't know. So I'm going to send you a picture here from Columbia's campus right now.
Well, Columbia, which has shut down in-person classes for the rest of the school year, how pissed would you be given how much you pay to go to Columbia as a student?
Oh, I'd be furious. But look at this picture. I sent it to you on WhatsApp. This is from the Columbia campus. So
what? Oh no,
for
that's
people who can't see, it says beware skunk on campus. And it's a skunk with a Star of David on it. That's done as like a caricature of Jews. I mean, this was commonly done during the Nazi period of trying to compare Jews to animals. Various types of rodents like skunks were very common during the Nazi period. And I love it. People are like, no, this is because of this one stink bomb incident that some Jews did on campus. And that I'm like, okay, that may have been how they justified it, but they knew what they were doing. This picture looks like old Nazi propaganda. Beware, like this is clearly specifically made to be reminiscent of Nazi propaganda.
Yeah, it even for those who are just listening has a vintage look to it, a 1950s propaganda vintage styling. So they're going for that.
They want Jewish students to feel afraid on campus. the people who are operating this. And this is, I think, a lot of the things is people don't know who's operating this. Do I think that the Qataris are like actively engaged in this sort of stuff? No, I think what's happening is that the people making decisions about student governments in the universities that are getting a lot of their funding from countries like Qatar know that they can afford to be more democratic and more authoritarian in the way that they roll out policies because their funders will have their backs. They don't need to worry about losing Jewish student money as much or Jewish alumni money as much. And so they make a more authoritarian decisions. On the ground, I think many people who are at these protests are not anti-Semitic.
I think people are being genuinely misled. They don't even know what
when they were chanting from the river to the sea, people were like, oh, we're just saying they need to leave the part of Israel that goes from the river to the sea.
They're thinking, let freedom ring. I'm pretty sure that's kind of just...
Yeah, and somebody was like, and then they showed them on a map where the river they were talking about is, and they were like, oh, they mean they want to kill all the Jews? They mean every one of them goes into the sea? And they're like, I did not know that's what I was chanting. Because they're being told these things by people in positions of authority in these activist groups that are actually severely anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. And so now I want to talk about what's going on college campuses right now. So I'm doing some quotes here. They vandalize university property with slogans such as Zionism equals genocide, new intifada, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Referring to a geographic area that encompasses the entirety of the state of Israel, where half of the world's Jews live. At Harvard, some students opted for chanting the Arabic version, from water to water, Palestine is Arab. On some campuses, the exclamation is escalated into death threats and physical assaults against Jewish students, where a Jewish Tulane University student tried to stop an anti-Israeli protester near campus from burning an Israeli flag. Protesters attacked him and other Jewish students, breaking one student's nose. When I saw on Harvard, there was this horrifying video of them basically hunting down a group of Jewish students and trying to trap them.
Oh, the library one?
Yeah, you saw that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a quote from another article. 2 weeks ago at a town hall, a student told me that what would make her feel safe in the law school would be to, quote, get rid of the Zionists, in quotes. And then later in this article, he said, I was stunned when students across the country, including mine, immediately celebrated the Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel on October 7th.
But you're not at all mentioning the atrocities that are being faced by these pro-Palestinian protesters. Don't forget about that poor young woman whose friends called 911 from their sit-in location because she had a tampon in for too long and they were certain that she would get toxic shock, but she refused to leave the location because she would be arrested if she did. And then, of course, there's Ilhan Omar's daughter, who has been kicked out of Barnard, blocked from her meal plan, and left homeless and destitute. These people really understand the plight.
Hold on. I need to finish, but I do love that you brought that up because these people are LARPing as like actual Nazis, and they do not.
Well, and many of them in actual subsequent meetings where they're like complaining about their mistreatment, they even have the audacity to compare their quote unquote mistreatment with the experience of Palestinians right now.
Yeah, they're like, I know what it feels like to be a Palestinian.
They're like, yeah, the things we're subject to. Yeah.
Hold on. So, Simone, let's continue. And keep in mind here, what we're saying here is the Palestinians have it hard now. The Nazis,
I feel my heart breaks.
My heart breaks. Remember, two-thirds of the Germans did not support the Nazi party. They went through hell during that period, but it was righteous what happened. It was the only realistic long-term solution to the problem, which the problem being the systematic genocide of a bunch of people. Okay. And this right now, from Israel's perspective, this is what they're doing right now is the only realistic long-term solution to having a genocidal group on their border. But I need to go.
We're going to attack again, and we're not going to stop.
And they said they were going to attack again. There was a quote that said, this won't be the last attack. The next one's going to be 20 times worse from Hamas, official Hamas. But anyway.
Well, and also what really bothers me and what I think also needs to be emphasized is that Palestine is set up like a human shield, and that none of the people who are making these decisions, who are planning these attacks, are really being subject to the retaliation from Israel now. They've just put a bunch of helpless, trapped people who do not know better in the line of fire, which is one of the most
And
reprehensible
this is
things.
the important thing to note. These tunnel systems are intense under the country right now, which foreign aid dollars we're paying for. And that is why the war is so bloody with the civilians right now, because it's not a war where the first people you kill are going to be the bad guys. Those are the last people you kill in a war like this.
It's a
You know,
human shield strategy, and it's disgusting. That
yeah.
your entire war strategy, after of course committing atrocities against your enemy, is to have your enemy commit atrocities against the most innocent and vulnerable people on your own
Because
side.
they do not care. And the amount of misinformation I see going on, I saw on my Facebook wall, some lady was like, "Did you know that Israeli soldiers were playing the sounds of a baby crying to lure out Palestinians and then shooting them?" And then I Google it, and it turns out that's what Hamas was doing to Israeli soldiers, not the other way around. And so just the amount of misinformation is insane. But I need to keep going with the quote here, okay? So Students for Justice in Palestine called the terror attack a quote unquote historic win for the quote unquote Palestinian resistance, end quote. A Columbia professor called the Hamas massacre quote unquote awesome and a quote unquote stunning victory. A Yale professor tweeted, quote, "It's been such an extraordinary day," end quote, while calling Israeli a quote murderous genocidal settler state, end quote. A Chicago professor posted a note reading, quote, "Israelis are pigs, savages, very bad people, irredeemable excrement. May they rot in hell," end quote. Israelis, he said. This is a Chicago art professor who hasn't been fired.
It's an art professor.
A UC Davis professor tweeted, yeah, but he's someone on campus.
Yeah, I
A
know.
UC Davis professor tweeted, quote, "Zionist journalists have houses with addresses, kids in school," end quote, adding, quote, "They can fear their bosses, but they should fear us more," end quote. Keep in mind what happened here. This is celebrating the brutal killing of 260 people attending a music festival for peace. That was one of the groups that was brutally murdered. And they're saying, this is awesome, or a victory, an extraordinary day. And this is mainstream within US college campuses. And I think that that's what people are missing, is they think that they're like, I have progressive friends. It's not that bad. The campuses that are what's happening on the campuses right now is not what you had to deal with before. And the rates of anti-Semitism are getting significantly worse. So there was some, I'm not even going to go into the stats on this because it's boring. But yeah, it should be obvious to everyone the rates of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic attacks are like at historically high levels. And I guess what I'd say is a lot of progressive Jews, and I'm going to play the little meme I did before, specifically like Reform Jews, I've seen them so cowardly turn their back on what's really happening or just believe these echo chambers. And the only solace I have is barely any of them have kids, and their kids aren't really Jewish to begin with anymore. I think that this whole situation is horrifying to me. It's horrifying that it's gotten to this place, but I think that there are some positives at the end of the tunnel here, right? The first being that if these attacks hadn't happened, I think when they finally did happen, it would have been worse. An attack on the state of Israel by one of these organizations was basically inevitable at this point. And a lot of people in Israel had become complacent about the threat that was posed. And that this attack was able to happen by surprise, I think, shows that level of complacency.
Yeah.
And there had begun to become a lot of infighting in Israel. And to an extent that I think it really begun to threaten the state of Israel, internal consistency. And I think that this has shown a few things that I'm really excited about. Not excited about, but I think this shows a few things that I don't know if it would have been in the best interest for Israel if this attack had never happened. I think this needed to water out. And I think when we look at the anti-Semitism that's come from, this anti-Semitism was there. This just allowed it to be aired. And I think a lot of people, a lot of Jews who had cozied up with progressives didn't realize how anti-Semitic the Progressive Party had become and progressive activists had become. And so this hopefully was a wake-up call that no, really in the United States, we need to begin to fight anti-Semitism again. We need to begin to call it out again. These people need to be shown the light, and the public needs to know who they are and what they really stand for. So I think that's one thing I'd say. The other thing I'd say is that we do live in a world now where historically, you can see from this quote, like Qatar had journalists on its payroll all around the world that had become politicians. Some of them even received basically salaries. And you're also talking about your personal social circles. If you historically, even if you were getting your news from Fox or Breitbart, you're not going to hear this as much.
So I want to know, where did you hear this?
from a number of the sources that I listed as I was going through
Well, I know,
this.
but how do people restructure their media diet in a way that ensures that they hear from these sources, or just, I don't know, like I wasn't exposed to this information and I'm not following mainstream
Yeah,
media
so
sources.
I'd say that for me, there's some people out there that just seem to be good at getting to the truth. I'd like to think that our audience finds us to be one of those people, and obviously do your own digging whenever we say something. We get things wrong occasionally, but who else? Like Richard Hanania, I read it. He often fairly true in what he says.
So it's just
Or
about
is a great source of
following
information.
the
It's about
right people.
following the right people. Yeah. Because you can't really do any better than that anymore. And unfortunately, you do get a bit of an echo chamber. Now that I've mentioned this, some other people will probably pick it up. It'll probably get tweeted around a few times. That's the way things work. And yeah. And so then the question here is, how do we think about this? I personally don't particularly have animosity towards Qatar. They're just playing their socio-political game right now. And
Well, TIL.
yeah,
Thanks, Mo.
I don't have animosity towards Qatar. I don't have animosity towards Qataris. I don't have animosity towards most people. Saudis, even your average Gazan citizen, I don't really have animosity to. I don't think of them as like really particularly lesser than other people, but I can look at the larger geopolitical picture and say, without X, worse things happen. Without Y, worse things happen. And I just don't see any other solution than what Israel is doing right now, which makes me grateful that at least so far, Israel has been staying the path. Now, Israel could end up going further. They could end up doing something truly horrific, and then I wouldn't support them anymore. I'm not saying I support Israel no matter what they do. I say that right now, they seem to be taking the type of measured approach that I think is the only, and people can be like, this approach isn't measured.
But to
When I
what
say
end?
measured,
It just
I'm
doesn't
on the
seem,
right point of the measuring
as
stick.
long as there is a Palestine, there is going to be a problem. So I don't really understand.
No, hold on. Gaza and Palestine are two totally different situations. The culture within the two regions are different. The ethnic groups within the two regions are different. The geopolitics of the two regions are different. There is a reason they were attacked from Gaza and not.
So
No.
you think that if they basically just completely take Gaza, that's it?
I think that the people, this is the problem, right? What Israel wants is these people to immigrate to other countries, but no other country will take them because the last time they did, they had a big revolt. And every time they did, even statistically, there was this case where the Danish took some, and even their descendants, like 3 generations down, are like way more into crime and stuff than other groups. It's a culture that is very different from the other surrounding regions. There's a reason, like you have to ask yourself, why aren't any of the Arab countries taking these people? If they care about these refugees, why aren't they taking them? It's because they don't care about the refugees. What they want is to use them to try to turn average, unthinking American activists against the Jewish state, where I think that I see, and you look at even the brutality of the two groups, right? When I look at what Israel's doing right now, yes, obviously the damage that they are putting out is on a much more large scale, but it is measured. It is civilization defending itself. When I look at the types of things, the horrifying grapes that were filmed, the child killings, and people are like, oh, Israel kills kids too by accident. The US kills kids too by accident. Every developed country, when they're at war, when we were fighting the Nazis, you don't think babies died in the bombing of Dresden? Okay, be realistic, bro. That is just the way war is, and they did not choose to start this war. They were actually, just so people know, leading up to the war, the amount of privileges they had given to the people of Gaza had risen dramatically because they were trying to get this deal done with Saudi Arabia. So they were actually treating them dramatically better than they had been in recent history. They had put in huge aid deals that were going there. This situation is, I think, not the situation that a lot of people are being told. And so, you can only look at the wider world and be like, look, people are playing with the hands they can play with. And I look at Qatar. Could Qatar realistically play a different hand than the hand they're playing? Could Israel realistically play a different hand? I think Qatar could, but it'd be hard and it'd be very risky. It would be very risky. And so I don't think they would. When you tell them play a different hand, you're asking them individually to risk their lives. And they don't have the same sorts of convictions or honor that I have. A lot of these people are just intergenerational royalty, basically, and they don't come from backgrounds of fighting for freedom or anything like that. It's a tough situation, and I am sad for a lot of what I'm seeing, but At the end of the day, this is civilization defending itself against people who in their attacks act like the antithesis of civilization. True barbarism is what
Yeah,
they
and not just against their enemies, against their own. And that's
Against their
where
own.
I'm like, yeah,
And
shots fired that I
if
cannot
we want
ignore.
to free the people of Gaza from Hamas, this is the only way to do it.
Mm.
And this then brings me, when I look at the people protesting on the behalf of this, when I look at the people at these Columbia protests and stuff like that, I see that our enemy, not only in the pronatalist movement do we have the enemy of the antinatalists who like want all things dead, but then there's this other side of like general progressivism, which is a promotion of barbarism over civilization, a promotion of cruelty, just completely unnecessary cruelty. It's just so obvious to me like who the good guys are in this. And it's not one of those situations where people are like, there's no good guys here. No, there's good guys. There's good guys here.
Oh, Malcolm, you're my good guy, and I love you a lot.
It's our boys in blue. The blue, the Israeli color is blue. Our boys in blue are the good guys. And a lot of them who have families and kids at home are out dying right now to preserve the country. We had a fan reach out to us. He's like, yeah, I'm deploying tomorrow. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to put in place for my kids. So to keep that in mind, these people, I can't even like they're dehumanizing these people who are fighting for trying to create something that works. It's tough. Anyway, love you to death.
I love you too, Malcolm. All right, I'm glad we're talking again. I miss you. We live and work together, but like it doesn't change the fact that I miss.
No, I absolutely know the feeling. I feel the exact same way, and I am so thrilled for every one of these recording sessions. And I'm going to be gone for a bit, and that we won't be talking to each other on these is going to kill me.
Torture.
Maybe we can find an excuse to film some while I'm at my reunion.
Maybe, but you're supposed to be busy socializing, so trying not to be weird.
Okay, speaking of, I actually have a reunion themed intro to this one. So
Really?
Yes.